how I would program external rotator exercise during a mesocycle for an overhead athlete. So a mesocycle, which is typically for me a 3-week phase, it just depends. So like after assessment of the athlete, you have to look at how weak or strong the rotator cuff muscle is. So if the rotator cuff is really weak, then you would need to train it twice a week at least in order to improve it. And it would need to be trained first in the training session. So if that's the case, what I would do is on upper body 1 and on upper body 2, now the external rotator exercise would fall as a A1 exercise, and the primary lift now would move to the B series and the assistance would move to the C series. But in terms of exercise selection, it's pretty simple. I've explained it in the previous episode, but you want to make sure that you train the rotator cuff with the humerus in multiple positions. It doesn't matter if you're an overhead athlete or not. If you want to fully develop the rotator cuff, you need to train it at all angles. So you need to pay attention to arm abducted to side, arm abducted in front, arm abducted to side. You need to train all of this. Typically the weakest is the arm adducted, so I tend to start with that. So you might do, like, let's say upper body 1, you do an external rotator exercise with the arm adducted to side. And then the other upper body 2 exercise, you use one with the arm is abducted either in front or to the side. But with an overhead athlete, the one that's more relevant or more specific, if you want, would be the arm abducted to side. So on a macro cycle structure, I would probably wait until towards the end to really focus on the arm abducted to side, which has a little bit more relevance, if you want, to throwing than the other 2 positions. But that's how you have to look at it. It's not a question of selecting that one perfect exercise for that one phase. It's about making sure that over time we hit every aspect of the rotator cuff. So why don't we have cardiovascular equipment like treadmills or bikes at Kilo? Well, multiple reasons. Like reason number 1 is priority and lack of space. So for us, we want to have everything that we prioritize first, and then if there's extra room, we can buy fluff pieces. But to me, we live in Southern California. A treadmill or a bike, it's easy to go outside and do that if that's really what you want to do. But for the purpose of training, for me, when it comes to conditioning training, I see way more value doing modified strongman exercises than treadmill or bike. Treadmill or bike, they're very simplistic in their motor pattern. It's very repetitive. It's very cyclical. Which is fine for purely cardiovascular development, but what I like about modified strongman is you can have a cardiovascular fitness component to the training, but at the same time you're working in different planes of motion at different angles, at different velocities. So it allows you to take the strength that you're building in the weight room, which tends to be a little bit more simplistic in nature, and use the modified strongman to make that strength a little bit more functional. So for athletes or weekend warrior or even Gen Pop who just wants to feel good, I just feel you have just more upside doing this than going on a treadmill for 30 minutes. And again, if that's really what you need to do, like we live by the beach, it's easy. Like you can do that year round. So to me, it's just not a priority for the training that I do with my athletes. Okay, so we've had this questions asked a bunch of times. We've answered it before, but because it keeps getting asked, I'm going to answer it again. So if you have clients that cannot do a single chin-up, do you have them start with the chin-up progression? So the answer is yes. So if you're a client who doesn't have crazy limitations, so let's say you're not morbidly obese, let's say you don't have a shoulder injury or anything like that, and you're coming to train and your goal is to become stronger, then I will put you through a chin-up progression where we're using a 3-part progression where phase 1, it's eccentric dominant, phase 2, it's an isometric method, and phase 3, it's assisted, so we use a spot to help the client. So by doing so, most people are eventually going to be able to do chin-ups on their own. Now, if the client comes in and they cannot do a chin, and you decide, okay, you can't do chin, we're going to step away from it, and you put them on a pull down instead, that's fine. But the problem is, if they did want to be able to do chin up one day, by doing pull downs, they're usually never going to be able to get strong enough to be able to do chins anyway. So you're kind of, not only are you wasting time in getting them proficient on chin ups, but the reality is the transfer from pull down strength to chin up might never actually happen. So for us at Kilo, our small group training sessions focuses on general population. We have clients from 16 to 66. Well, again, if there's no limitation, we always strive to get them to be able to do chins, and we always start them on a chin up progression, and eventually they're able to do it. Now, if the client is overweight, to do that chin up progression, it won't really help, because now they need to lose the fat first in order to be able to express strength on a chin up. So for them, while we're having them focus on nutrition, and while they're getting started into training and burning calories, etc., then we use the pull down at that point in time, because that's the only thing they can do. So you have to be realistic with things, right? Although we promote chin-ups, although we have a chin-up progression, we fully understand that not every human being will be able to get into a gym and be able to do the chin-up progression. So you just have to be realistic. If you can't, or if you cannot even do an eccentric contraction, even if you're not overweight, simply because your level of neuromuscular coordination is so low, then do pull downs. There's nothing else you can do. So just be logical about it, but keep in mind that training, it's about progression. So eventually you have to move on, and you have to challenge the client a little bit. It doesn't matter if they're Gen Pup. Gen Pup still loves challenges, and you have them go through the chin up progression. On back and shoulders day, is it better to do them in a agonist-antagonist double station superset or a standalone? It just depends. If you're doing single stations, or like just simple sets and reps, or if you're doing special techniques like trisets, post-exhaustion, heavy light, blah, 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 blah. So if you do that, then obviously you cannot do an A1, A2 setup. So you're going to have A1, A2 might be back, where you're doing your heavy light, for example, for 5 sets. And then your B1, B2 will be your shoulders, where you're doing your heavy light for 5 sets. Now, if you're just doing back and shoulders, but the lifts are chins and overhead press, then you can do A1 chin, A2 overhead press, or vice versa, A1 overhead press, A2 chins. So it just depends on what method or what structure of training you're looking for. And then I would even add that, to be honest with my bigger, stronger clients, although I'm doing something like heavy light, I could still do A1, A2, back, shorter rest period. So A1, back, 10-second break, A2, back, 90-second break, A3, shoulders, 10-second break, A4, shoulder, 90-second break, and then go back to back. Okay, so that's also an approach you can do, which is kind of, in a way, it is a A1, A2, but A1, A2 of a heavy light with a heavy light. So that's also doable. So there's many permutations. It's always a question of understanding who is the client you're training, their recovery ability, their strength level, their size. And when you take all of this into consideration, it can drastically affect the layout of a training session. So there's no perfect way, if you want. It really is a question of reflecting the capacity of the client you have in front of you. Why do I rarely recommend conditioning circuits of more than 4 exercises? So the main reason for this is, one, on a structure standpoint, it's mathematically speaking, it's often easier to set up proper conditioning workouts In terms of work to rest ratio with a 4 exercise setup, that's one thing. But the reality, the most important aspect though, is considering that our conditioning sessions at Kilo are done with our general population clients for the most part. The problem is if you have conditioning sessions that has 8, 10, 12 different exercises, for that Gen Pop client, it's a lot of movement to learn. It's too much. And it detracts a little bit of the output that the client can give within the training session when they're focusing more on exercises that they're used to or that they know and understand. So I'd much rather have a smaller library of exercise for them to learn for a phase so that they become very comfortable doing that exercise so that they can truly push themselves on a energy demand perspective doing a motor pattern that they're more used to. If you have such a wide range of exercises, it gets a little bit confusing for them as to what to do, and they forget what the exercise is, or they haven't mastered it very well, so they're all over the place and they can't really exert themselves the way they should for the proper performance of energy system training. So to me, I find that 4, it's that sweet spot that not only makes it easier to plan the session, but it makes it easier for the client to feel comfortable going through the session while not wasting time out trying to learn a bunch of different things. Yes, it might appear like it's fun, but I just feel you're kind of detracting a little bit from what you're trying to do with your conditioning session. So which advanced chin-up variation do I like to use with athletes? So there's a decent amount of advanced variations, but some of my favorite, you have the sternum chin-up, where you're doing a chin and you're basically trying to tilt your torso so that your sternum is touching the handle instead of your upper chest. So you have a little bit more mid-back being involved. You have the lean away chin, which is a regular chin, but then eccentrically you're pushing yourself away. You have the subscapularis pull-up, which is the same idea as the lean away, but instead you're in a pronated grip, so the subscap gets triggered because the subscap, you need to be in internal rotation to engage it fully. So now you're pulling all the way up and you're pushing yourself away. You have side-to-side chins, which is harder than it looks. You have towel chin-ups, which is really good for, especially for fighters that have to hold on to gis and stuff like that. You have thick grip chin-ups. For those who can do it, the one-arm chin, which I can't do, but I mean, those are all like rings, chin-ups on rings. The instability allows for a little bit more stabilizer demands. So all of these, I mean, they can be used at certain specific times to improve chin-up performance, or even to kind of break plateaus of standard chin-up protocols. What you'll notice sometimes is if you've been really pushing like neutral or supinated or pronated grip chin variations, like in a linear fashion for a while, and you find that the client kind of has reached a plateau, oftentimes interjecting a phase with one of these specialty, more advanced chin variation, it's such a different stressor that sometimes when you get back to regular chin performance, you go past that plateau you'd reached. So I like to use them for that as well, for people who train on a more long-term basis. But with the athletes, you have to be a little bit more specific of what it is you're trying to accomplish. So a fighter, again, let's say a jiu-jitsu guy, in the specific preparation phase, doing thick grip or towel chins, to me would be the advanced chin-up variation of choice, just because it's so relevant to what they're doing. Okay, but these are like my favorite ones.